We advise the opinions and views of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Welcome to our show, Heartbeat.
Ay, marami pong salamat.
Marami rin yung lalaki, ang ayaw rin ng divorce.
Change, meaning introduction of new policies.
At natutuwa ako na
And all that, or just katito.
buwan ng linggo ng kanyang panunungkulan. And
It went from 5 peso and 30 centavos.
Lahat, welcome to Heartbeat Live. I'm your host, Ray Orosa. We will be together to discuss moving issues and issues on fire in this nation for the next almost 1 hour. Alam po ninyo sa gabing ito, bago lang pakilala ko sa inyo ang aking pinitagang panauhin sa gabing ito, ay let's go to our text contest dito, ang winners po ng ating dalawang text. And last week kasi we had as a guest here, si si Dean Bacani ng Notre Dame University in Mindanao, and we talked about the framework agreement between the GRP and the MILF. And so we chose these two texts here, and we will be sending you an e-load of 100 pesos. One of them, the first one, is from Edna of Laguna, 0926-624-2769. Sa framework ng Bangsamoro, sana kasama ang mga Kristiyano. Palagay ko kahit gaano kaganda ang intensyon ng Bangsamoro, pero iilan lang ang makikinabang. Palagay ko, hindi pa rin matatapos ang problema sa Mindanao. Tamang edukasyon o dapat i-educate ang mga tao roon, lalo na ang younger generation. Alam po ninyo, ang kailangan nating makita dito is that this is not a perfect agreement. Nobody is saying that the framework agreement is perfect. Kanya mayroong transitional committee that is working out the details of this framework. Hindi pa yan po ang peace agreement. That we've got to be very, very clear on that. But there are two major comments that many people have made about the framework agreement that, quite apart from the good things about it, are two also constraints on the framework agreement. And one of them is the lack of representation in the creation of the framework agreement from all the stakeholders in Mindanao. And that includes the Lumads, that includes the Christians, that includes the MNLF, and then of course the other thing that we should remember is that we don't know to what extent this framework agreement has taken into consideration the inherent rivalries and differences between the three major Muslim groups. Yung mga Tausug, represented for example by the MNLF head, Nur Miswari, then you have the Maranawans, and then you have the Maguindanaoans. And they do not exactly trust each other. Now, they can make common cause from time to time if there is a bigger issue at stake, but after a while, when that thing is resolved or there is some agreement on that, then they go back to their own historically developed rivalries, and that's a problem. Now, of course, dito, since it's only the MILF that is a part of this agreement, it does give a tremendous advantage to the MILF eventually in trying to create and take on the full leadership of the Bangsamoro. Whatever they want to call it, whether it's, wala na kasi, hindi na uso yung word na state. But we must remember that this framework agreement is a much, much better version than the original that was done during the time of President Arroyo. So it's a tremendous improvement. Perfect none, but remember I told you, principle of negotiation. The best kind of negotiated agreement is one where everybody walks away a little bit unhappy. Meaning to say, lahat learned how to compromise and to give in order for that agreement. Kasi pagka ang negotiation mo, contest, kailangan akong manalo, kailangan akong magdumina sa iyo, ay sama lang po ng loob ang ibibigay niyan. And then of course, ang second ating texter dito is Lito of Las Piñas from 0905-220-9525. Sabi ni Lito, sa ordinaryong mamamayan ng Bangsamoro, ano ang benepisyo nila? Baka naman MILF lang ang makikinabang o mga politiko. This is a very, very valid issue because nobody is looking at it in terms of anong benepisyo ng mga tao. There are many, many things that many of our Muslim brethren need. For example, they need massive education. It will take the Bangsamoro quite a few years to develop a revenue base, and therefore the central government has to support them in terms especially of public education for as many of the members of what may result as the Bangsamoro. Marami pang kailangan itulong dyan, number one. Number two, kailangan din ng katakot-takot na tulong for the development of infrastructure. Hindi makakaya ng Bangsamoro, whatever you want to call that, immediately when they develop autonomy. But in a sense, I think those are the areas that need to be defined in order that we are able to go to the ordinary man on the street, both Christian, Lumad, and Muslim, to tell him, kayo as individuals, ganito ang paraan kung paano kayong makikinabang, kanya mabuti itong agreement na ito para sa inyo. And our hope is that by the time they finish the negotiations with the interim committee that is being established and given until probably sometime January or February to finish their agreement, that we will then be able to see how they fleshed out the commitment to as many people in the affected in that historic document as possible. Okay? All right, let's go to our issue now. We will talk about something else that's very good and very nice. And my guest tonight is a dear old friend of mine, si Senator Rene Sagisan. Pinabalik ko dito. Alam po ninyo, natutuwa naman ako na si Kuya Rene. Alam mo, hindi maarting tao eh. Ha? And we enjoy just talking with each other. So, makinig tayo and don't forget to send your text. Welcome, Kuya Rene.
Oh, salamat po.
Salamat punta mo dito. Ha? Pag-usapan natin, gusto ko kasalanan. Yung syntax.
Mukha ba akong makasalanan?
Ay, hindi. Kanya kita kinakausap kasi mukha kang santo eh. Ha? But dito nga kailangan nating makita. Ito dito, alam natin, ang syntax, ang cover dyan, largely, sigarilyo at saka alcohol. Yung nagbibigay ng cancer at saka yung isang nagbibigay ng cirrhosis, no? Ngayon, kung napakasama talaga ng paninigarilyo, although you cannot say that everybody who smokes will eventually get cancer, there are some who somehow escape it. Ha? Na they smoke all their life. Iba dyan, nabentaan siya ng naninigarilyo.
Lalo sa North.
Oo, lalo na po sa Ilocos, nakikita niyo mga matatanda doon, pag niroroli yung tabakong gano'n, haba-haba at ang laki-laki.
70, 80, 90.
Tapos meron pa doon, Kuya Rene, yung kinukuha yung sigarilyo, sinisindihan, tapos yung mesindi pinapasok sa bibig.
Well, I saw that in Pasig in my youth.
Oo. Hindi mo na nakikita ngayon, ha?
Iba na yata ang...
Iba na kultura, ha?
Yeah.
Hindi, pero tingin ko sa norte, nangyayari pa din.
Still. Okay.
Ngayon, of course, dapat na siguro, bakit pa tayo nagpipilit magtanim ng tabako kung ganun? Kung nakakasama ito sa kalusugan.
Well, yan ang kamukha din ng alak yan eh. May tumatawag na demon rum. May mga tumatawag naman, the oil of conversation. No?
Ngayon,
ganun.
ang gusto nilang gawin, pataasin ang buwis upang magkaroon ng revenue ang pamahalaan. No? Kasi right now, we're still operating in a deficit. I think for this year, we will still be below target, but they're expecting the deficit to be about 115 or 120 billion. Malaking halaga pa rin, but it's still manageable. No? Hindi naman sobra. Kasi ang target nila, mga 250 billion, but they're coming in much lower, which means that there is reasonably good fiscal management, okay, going on. Kasi iba yung monetary management sa fiscal management. Yung monetary management sa Bangko Sentral ang tumitirada dyan. Ang fiscal management, ang Secretary of Finance ang nag-aano dyan, at saka ang budget chief, about how they release the funds in accordance with the budget that may be approved by Congress. But the question that we should ask now is, all right, Senator Ponce Enrile came up with a statement na Ay nako, pag tinaasa lang ng gano'ng kalaki, it will only encourage smuggling. Naniniwala ka ba doon? Because that's an old argument that's
Well,
been raised.
is one valid concern. And then yun nga, kung titingnan din natin yung mga naghahanap buhay para pagtitinda ng sigarilyo, anong impact sa buhay nila? Dahil baka mawala ng trabaho, they will turn to crime.
Let me give you another example. Yun ang argument na ginagamit sa wedding eh. Na pag nawala daw ang wedding, sino magbibigay ng empleyo doon sa lahat ng mga kobrador, sa lahat ng mga runner, at lahat ng iba pa?
Hindi lang yan. Pag ikaw mayaman, pwede ka magkasino, pwede ka mag-derby. Kaya yan mga anti-poor yan eh. Yung ang mga maliliit na wala namang representation sa Congress, yan ang mga tatamaan yan. Dahil ano mangyayari sa poor cigarette vendors, hindi makabenta. Ang makikinabang dyan, tama si Manong dyan eh, smuggling.
Okay. I remember many years ago, a very well-known cigarette manufacturing company. Alam mo kasi, ang tax kasi dyan sa sigarilyo, dati, I'm not sure if it's still obtaining today, but I think so, dalawang base. Yung tinatawag nilang hand-rolled, mas mababa ang taxation because nagkikreate ng labor. Tapos meron yung automated by machine, mas mataas ang tax noon. Ang ginagawa niya noon, pag-araw, hand-rolled. Pag-gabi, tumatakbo yung mga automatic packer cigarette ng mga sigarilyo. That's number one. And number two, kasi meron tayong blue seal mentality sa sigarilyo eh. Di ba? Gumagawa siya ng blue seal, ini-smuggle niya palabas tapos pinababalik niya smuggled. So, ang tayo mga Pilipino rito, medyo mababaw ang utak. Akala natin smuggle yung blue seal to eh. Oh. Ala, sige, bilhin natin kaysa sa local brand. So kumikita siya both from smuggling at saka yung paggagawa ng sigarilyo dito sa bansang ito. But the issue that comes up here is, I guess taxation always has to be balanced eh, di ba? Yung prinsipyong yon. Now, they are claiming na ang taas daw ng presyo ng sigarilyo with the sin tax, 1,000%. But that's the cigarette manufacturers that I think that are claiming that. But whatever it is, are you in favor of just taxing it so that people will lessen or stop their smoking?
Walang, like I said kanina,
Parang addiction yan
anong mangyayari ron sa mga nabubuhay dahil sa pagbibenta ng sigarilyo kung marireduce ang consumption? Kaya talagang pagtitimbang-timbang niyan, the standpoint of the lawmaker, policy maker, ang bias ko for the poor.
Okay.
Kaya siguro hindi dapat taasan if it will mean fewer jobs.
Pero kung nakakasama sa kalusugan nila lahat nito, at pumupugsa at nakakamatay ng tao, is the concern for the poor a proper justification for that? Kasi, paano naman yung mga naapekto ng mga naninigarilyo?
Well, pinagbabawal na nga yan o nilalagyan na nga ng hazardous to your health. Pero ganun pa rin, gaya din ng alak. Meaning, masama daw epekto, pero mentalidad naman sa amin sa palanan, happy-happy tayo.
I'll give you what probably people will consider a ridiculous example. No? Pero ito, the statistics came from the American Society of Doctors. Ha? Every year, accidental deaths as a result of wrong prescription, wrong medication, wrong diagnosis, etc., etc. Over 140,000 deaths a year, average. Now, doctor's fault. Ngayon naman, accidental deaths from firearms. Okay? And there are something, I don't know how many million firearm holders dito sa Amerika din ito. So much, accidental deaths from firearms a year, 1,500 something. I cannot remember the exact number, but in other words, a very ridiculous number. In the States, what they're saying is, in terms of the number of doctors, this is something like a 20% fatality rate. With respect to firearms, it's 0.02%. So, the joke was, the conclusion, let us outlaw doctors. Because they kill.
Well, pero yun nga,
Di
din
ba?
naman sa saligang batas nila talaga, they have the right to bear arms. Atlantic yung,
Sa Amerika.
yung labi ng National Rifle.
No, but the point is, that causes far less harm to the population than doctors.
So ano, let's kill all the doctors.
Huh? That was not the conclusion.
Hindi
Let's
nga.
outlaw the doctors.
I meaning talagang nagkakamali lahat naman tayo.
But
may
that
kasi-
high percentage? You know,
ano nga solution doon?
the number of deaths out of that in America is higher than the number of people who die from road accidents in the whole America.
Yeah, but in an uncertain, imperfect world, talagang there are people who get in trouble because of bad doctors, bad lawyers, blood,
Okay.
everything.
Well, nobody is trying to outlaw cigarettes yet. Although they are fighting the kind of warning that,
Yeah, yan
that
ang-
is
yan
supposed
ang
to be
issue
put.
ngayon, na-
The issue is, wag daw magpakita ng hindi magandang retrato to warn
Yung-
people. Kasi po, pag nakakita kayo ng baga ng isang taong naninigarilyo at namatay, makikita niyo ang itim-itim ng baga dahil sa tarin, nicotine,
Yeah,
and
yan
other
ang
chemicals.
issue nga yata sa Estados Unidos
Oo.
ngayon.
Ngayon, pero ang tanong dito, the issue therefore, the thing that comes up is, should this be looked at strictly from an economic standpoint, or are there moral issues involved in raising the taxation covering cigarettes and alcohol?
Well, yun yung ano dyan, meron din psychic satisfaction naman yung ang daming problema sa buhay, kailangan to relax
I don't know if that medically that is proven. I think what it created there is an addiction, a dependence on, a chemical dependence, especially on cigarettes and high levels of alcohol. No. So the question is, if you are addicted to something, should I just let you bahala ka sa buhay mo?
Anong gagawin na? Pakikialaman mo ko. I am destroying myself. Anong gagawin? Kamukha rin sa marijuana yan na hindi pa proven conclusively na talagang masama yan, except na baka it may lead to other drugs daw. Pero ganun kikriminalizein, ikukulong ka. So, you're destroying yourself. We'll do it for you. Arrestuhin ka namin. Sasama ka namin sa common criminals. Kaya yung mga marijuana ganyan, unang-una, legal nga yan in some places, like Netherlands.
Are you advocating legalization of marijuana
Hindi
use and
naman.
cultivation dito?
Pero
Hindi
kung,
naman.
hindi, maraming nagsasabing yan. Sina George
Ang
Hughes.
NPA lang ata ang nag-cultivate ng marijuana dito. They are in the drug trade.
Hindi lang yata sila dahil
Marami pang iba.
hanggang sa Afghanistan, yung opium, yung poppy. In other words, those people need treatment, need hospitalization. Pero pag kinulong mo, you're destroying someone you are...
Maybe the answer is not to make them kulong, no, but go through rehab.
Correct. That should be the attitude. Let's decriminalize yung Mary Jane dahil dinidestroy niya yung sarili niya, papasok ang estado and will do the destruction. Rehab talaga. In other words, wag sa Muntinlupa, some rehab facility.
Let me ask you a really left-wing question. Do you also favor legalization of prostitution? Kung gusto ko naman makiapi dito sa isang tao, anong pakialam ng sino man?
Well, in other countries, dahil talagang, kasabi nga ni Schopenhauer, yung bargaining ability ng prostitute has to do with the number of good women in the community. Sa society natin ngayon
Sobrang dami ng good.
Yung
Or
araw
hindi?
na pagpupuntahan sa mga kasa, ba't ka pupunta sa kasa? Loose na ang morals daw. Kaya,
Let's go to the bar and pick up.
yun ang mukhang authoritative ka. I mean, yung dating mo talagang...
Hindi, sa lahat ng binabasa mo, alam mo, you read a lot of things about how to pick up in a bar, how to start the conversation with somebody of the opposite sex. And itong mga how-to books na ito is addressed both to men and women, not necessarily prostitutes.
Hindi, pero
But
yung...
dito sa atin, ang dami-dami dito, naglalakad sa kalsada, punta ka sa Makati, tabi ng mga hotel, nandun sila sa mga sidewalk,
Especially today,
transvestites pa.
yun ang ano nga dyan, doon sa isang lugar daw, mga ganon. Kaya, sabi nga ni Ambassador Thomas, 40% raw ng mga turista, yun ang pinupunta dito eh. Well, kamukha din sa Washington DC dahil nandun eh, kahit tanghalin tapat eh,
Oo nga, kanya lang I
pinoproposition ka eh.
object to Ambassador Thomas citing the Philippines for
Of
that.
course.
Dapat sabihin din niya tungkol
dapat
sa Amerika.
pinalaya
at
sa yung persona non grata na yan. Dahil, I mean, it should have come from an ambassador. Na pinupunta rito.
para pulaan tayo dito.
Yeah,
Parang walang prostitute sa
sa
Amerika.
Washington DC, tanghalin tapat eh, po-propositionin ka eh.
At saka laganap doon ng escort service. And it's all over the internet.
Ay, taka,
Lahat yan, these are all bails, for the most part, bails for prostitution.
yan lang mobile phone eh. Maraming kamunduhan na nangyayari dyan.
Talaga. Alright, but the issue yan is, ang nagiging problema dito, pag tinitinan mo kung paano patakbo ng isang bansa, in a secular government, should there be where do you draw the line between the interest of the state and the people and what some well-guided or misguided religious person might say this is moral or immoral?
Well, wag mo na lang pagsabi, but once I work in government, no? And minsan, ang choices mo dyan, bad, worse, and worst. So, as a practical matter, you pick the bad. May babanat sa'yo. Pero pag hindi mo naman pinili yon, worse ang alternative, if not indeed the worst. No? Kaya miski anong gawin mo, welcome to public life. Talaga mapupulaan ka.
The issue there that comes up is many times, we choose this alternative, pinipili natin itong alternatibong ito kasi akala natin ganito ang mangyayari, mas masahol. But there is no empirical evidence that proves that that is exactly what will happen. Sometimes we surprise ourselves. Hindi. Pagka pumunta ka sa alternative B at wag ito, hindi ganun ang nangyayari, iba.
Well,
Unanticipated ang konsekwensya.
So, kung ano
Diba?
talaga yung honest judgment mo, dahil sometimes talagang very difficult and very critical ito ang mga choices mo na pinakinggan mo lahat. Yun lang, pakikinggan mo sari-saring opinion and then make your decision.
Pwede ba sabihin ng pamahalaan dito, for example, hindi naman kita pinipigilan kung gusto mong magsigarilyo, kung gusto mong inom. Kanya lang bayaran yung buwis na gusto namin dito. In other words, is it the obligation of government to provide cigarettes and alcohol at the cheapest possible price and
Well,
not make it a source of such government revenue?
Well, pag tinaas mo naman talaga, unang-una yung mga pobreng street vendors, baka mawala ng trabaho. And then smuggling with florists. Kaya all these things, sinitimbang-timbang mo. Kaya nga, bad, worse, and worse ng...
In other words, what you're suggesting dito, Senator Rene, is na dahil sa puspos ng kasamaan ng maraming bahagi ng ating pamahalaan, lalong-lalo na ang customs, lalong-lalo na ang Coast Guard. Kasi yung pag-smuggling, for example, ng sigarilyo, dinadaman, naalala mo, dinalan dyan sa Cavite, sa mga beach ng Cavite, pinapasok yan through containers. Sa dami ng isla natin, napakadaling mag-smuggle. Tapos mula doon, dadali naman sa mga urban centers yan. The other part of the coin is, yun namang mga tao na mapipilitan tumigil ng paninigarilyo dahil sa hindi na nila makakaya at maaabot ng bulsa, ang pwede namang masabi natin, magkakaroon sila ng mas malaking pera para sa kabuhayan ng kanyang pamilya. Di ba? Kasi yung pera ngayon na dating gagastusin niya sa sigarilyo o inom, mauuwi ngayon pantusto sa pangangailangan ng asawa, ng anak, ng pangangaral, pagkain at lahat.
Baka mapunta sa kulasisi.
Ayun ay isang problema pa yung malaki.
Talagang, yan ang, pag nawalan ng dun maghahanap ng ibang panandali ang aliw.
Well, yun din ang problema na maski na tinaasan mo ito at tumigil ng paninigarilyo, wala tayong maikatitiyak
Yeah.
na gagastusin ngayon yung perang yun sa tamang paraan
Correct.
O sa tamang daan. Ika nga, sabi mo, katulad yan, nung isang pulis na kausap ko, sabi ko, pagka ba tinreplay ang sweldo mo, sabi niya, sabi ko, matitigil ba yung kurakot nyo pag tinaas ang sweldo nyo? Sabi, maski na matriple ang sweldo, matitigil ba ang kurakot? Paano naman sir, hindi nyo kami naintindihan Sabi ko, bakit? paano sabi niya, 3 asawa ko, anong gusto mong gawin ko, iwanan ko yung dalawa.
Triple ang asawa.
Kaya maski na itaas mo yung sweldo, kanya marami nagre-reklamo, nagaganda naman service in public pagka mataas ang
No, but
sweldo.
I think that's a valid point. We have to treat them better. We have to pay them above the level of temptation and corruption.
Is there such a thing as above the level of temptation?
Pag dinala mo sa ibang bansa yan, adequate ang pay, adequate ang benefits, hanggang pension, they behave well.
Kasi alam nila, ang karamihan sumusunod sa batas. Dito sa atin, ako lang ang susunod sa batas, yung kapitbahay ko hindi sumusunod sa batas, ganito ang ginagawa, yun siya. Kung ganyan ang kalagayan ng
Hindi,
ating
pero-
respect to the rule of law,
Umpisan mo sa jaywalking.
Oh.
At saka yung mga, dahil lahat ng jeepney, doon pumaparada sa kanto, no?
ay, Kuya Rene,
Hindi, ngayon lang
meron
na-
lang halang na bakal, sinisira pa yung bakal.
Hindi, kausap ko nga yung isang kliyente, just before I came here, ganun pala, sa bawat sisiw, piso. Yan ang nangyayari sa poultry pala, ang problema eh. May tarifa. Kasi the policemen are not adequately paid. Pero I refuse to believe na we are less honest than other cultures. No? Kaya pag sila nalipat sa Singapore, sa Hong
Ibang
Kong,
asal.
iba, talagang alam nila hanggang ano sila burol nila, may tulong may pension pa.
Alam mo ba, I don't know whether this is formally or simply by closing their eyes. But in Singapore today, there is a red light district already operating under the eyes of the government.
Well, yan in many places sa
You
mundo.
know, yung lugar na akala natin napaka-straight-laced.
No, pero mas realistic minsan yung gano'n na
Oo.
human nature I mean, young people with rampaging hormones, talagang,
Or visitors from other countries.
that's also true. Yan ang sinasabi nga ni Thomas. Pero, I know, having lived in Washington, D.C., nung araw, sa gabi lang yung mga kalapating mababaan lipad. Ngayon, tanghalin tapat, lumilipad yung mga kalapating yun.
Alright, bago po tayo magpatuloy, we have to stop for a few reminders. Huwag kayo mawawala. But let us know what you feel. Show the syntax. How do you like the syntax? Talaga bang dapat magtaas ng presyo ng sigarilyo at alak? We'll be right back. Okay, balik po tayo. We've got our text now, 0926-624-2769 from Edna of Laguna. Okay lang nataasan ang syntax bill, pero dapat bigyan din ng tamang informasyon ng mamamayan na masama ang mga sin products sa kalusugan. Kaso ang reason ng gobyerno ay punan ang kakulangan ng pera ng ibang sektor. I'm afraid na dumadami ang mga kriminal para lang mapagbigyan ang bisyo. Okay, so anong masasabi natin doon sa sabi ni Ate Edna dyan from Laguna, Karen na hindi ko nga din, well, I don't know basically how we can answer this in a way na, of course, ang problema dito, yung syntax na yon, Hindi natin alam kung saan pupunta. At paano gagamitin ng pamahalaan. Katulad yan ng VAT, ng value added tax, no? Wala tayong nalalaman kung saan saan pupunta yan. And it would seem to me that some of these taxes should specify the use of the revenue.
Well, like I said, ang isang problema nga natin, only the BSP officials today, I think, are adequately paid. Pati ang legal bills nila, sagot pa ng taxpayer. Pero everybody else in government is overworked, underpaid, over-criticized. At the end of the day, ombudsman pa.
Eh bakit gusto nila pumasok sa politika? Lang, ikwento mo nga sa akin. Why
Aba,
are they all in a hurry to get into the
yung
world of politics?
Iba nga dyan, no, papasok sa customs. Pagdating ng unang payday, ang ibig nyo sabihin, may sweldo pa. Yun. Kasi nung when you and I were young, 120 sweldo. And even as a young lawyer, I passed the bar, and sinuwerteng na top 10. My pay was increased from 140 a month to 170. Pero yun, adequate na nung panahon natin yun eh.
That was over 25% increase. You should consider yourself lucky. Kasi mga increase sa sweldo ngayon, 5%, 3%.
Pero
Diba?
at saka nung panahon namin nga, 7 kami sa pamilya, the smallest in the neighborhood sa Pasig. But we did not feel we were poor. Ngayon, mag-asawa, nagtatrabaho, dalawa lang ang anak, very tight ang budgeting.
Kanya lang naman, Kuya Rene. Magkano ang Coca-Cola nung panahon na yon?
10 centimos.
10 centimos. Hindi, meron, 5 centimos lang kasi meron ka pang deposito sa bote.
At
Kung
saka,
sasoli mo yung bote, bibigyan ka pa ng 5. So, ang net cost mo sa Coca-Cola, 5 centimos. Magkano ang Coca-Cola ngayon?
grabe. San Beda nga nun pisong baon, 10 centimos sa hopyang hapon. If you felt like splurging, 30 centavos hamburger.
Oh.
Kaya nun, I think, nung panahon yun, na rich men entering public life, living it poor. Ibang-iba nun na after, ewan ko ngayon, Gone with the Wind. I don't know how you feel about it, but to me, after 20 years of Marcos, 10 years of
We
Gloria,
cannot roll back the sands of time. Di ba meron kantang yan? Roll back the sands of time. We cannot roll back the sands of time.
Why not?
We have to deal with what is here. Di ba?
no, pero to me naman,
Oo.
we have to go back to what we were. In other words, yung old-fashioned values, maybe Jurassic na, no? Pero makakabalik naman siguro tayo if we'll have a succession of,
But
honest.
you're asking for a moral revolution that nobody in the political field can lead. The political field does not allow. It's thoroughly amoral, if not immoral. And if you try to go into politics now and say, this is one of my biggest disappointments before when I was trying to participate in the field of politics. Sabi ng tao, abay, pag nalagay ko sa pwesto at hindi kayo nagsamantala, kayong gago. Abay, kung yun ang pag-iisip ng taong bayan, bakit pa ako magsisilbi sa tao? Papasok ko sa politika para magnakaw, magpayaman, magpasasa. Ganun na lang ang gagawin natin. But we have a question from 0916-736-1553 from Ed C. of Pasay. Good evening, Ed. Sinasabi nila na mas lalong mahihirapan ang mga tobacco farmers dahil sa sin tax bill. Sa tingin ko, ginagamit na lang nila ang tobacco farmers para mas-sway ang opinion ng public sa sin tax bill. Sa tagal ng panahon na napakababa ng excise tax sa cigarettes at alcohol, napakalaki na ng kinita ng mga malalaking kumpanya ng sigarilyo at alcohol. That's true. But how do you regulate that without coming into some kind of price control? Kung paano ibabayad sa nagtatanim para sa tabako at magkano niya ibebenta yung mga dahon na kanya pinagbibili pagkatapos niyang ibilad at patuyuin.
Hindi natin makalimutan yung mga maliliit na walang mga lobbyist. Ano nga ang impact sa buhay nila? Ano din ang impact ng mga sidewalk vendors na tatamaan niya dahil talagang bababa ang kita nila eh.
Pambihira na naman yung sidewalk vendor na nagbebenta ng sigarilyo lang. Ayun pa kapanahon natin, yung mga nag-ano ng jeep, dala yan sa kanilang kamay na ganito. Nagbebenta, sigarilyo lang ang dala. Pero pambihira na ngayon ang sidewalk o yung nagmalakad na vendor na nagtitingi ng sigarilyo. Hindi na masyado madami yan. So, kung hindi ka na pwede magbenta ng sigarilyo, baka meron ka ibang pwedeng ibenta. Candy,
Dyaryo.
lahat pa ng iba pwede mo sa marahil ibenta. So, my own feeling is, it is true that some dislocation will probably happen.
No, and that smuggling will be encouraged. Yun ang mga epektong pag ganyan ng kataas, talagang mas profitable ang smuggling.
Well, balik tayo sa isang napaka-foundational value. And unfortunately, some of our entrepreneurs in this country don't really care if what they're doing is illegal so long as they make money from it. That's why smuggling is so profitable. You misdeclare your goods or you misdeclare the actual value of your goods. But as far as they're concerned, wala akong pakialam. Basta may lulusot ko, basta ako'y kumikita, okay. And papartihan ko lahat ng iba doon. Everybody happy. Kung ang bebenta ko naman, walang bibili, di ako malulugi. Bakit binibili pa rin sa akin ng tao? Yan. So, diyan naman din ako kumikita. So, itong question ito, kuminsan hindi madaling sagutin. Di ba? At hindi natin madaling basta pagpasyahan at sabihin, hindi, ganito na
Very
yan.
vulnerable din itong law enforcement authorities dahil nga kailangan din yung income. Kaya nga I'm saying na we begin by trying to pay people above the level of corruption.
Well, that mean a tremendous cost on the part of the government. Where are they going to get the revenue where even now the salaries are low, but they are already in deficit?
No, meron naman pang, kasi napupunta ngayon sa corruption, I think it's enough na pataasin lahat
Kung
ng...
mababawi mo, pero kung ang volume bababa, mas kinitinaas mo yung buwis, you may not get any more revenue than what you used to get before when the tax was lower and the volume was higher. So I think it's a question of saan nagtatagpo yung dalawang linya where it becomes counterproductive to raise taxes anymore. Diba? So that's a mathematical formula that can be you factor in the question of demand, supply, etc., para makita mo. Malalaman mo, because it is true, you can overtax so that you will so decrease the demand that your net revenue take is going to be very low. Well, 0917-891-8341 from Mr. Oxon of Singalong, Manila. The bottom line of all these problems are, first, education, understanding of all the laws of the land, and second, strict implementation of the law. This could be done in the school as well as assistance from media. Well, what is the foundation of any kind of democratic system? I think rule of law is one of the most fundamental. If there is no rule of law, to me, there is no democracy.
Well, as important as that is the first law of mankind, which is survival.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, pay our public officials, especially law enforcement, above the level of temptation and corruption.
Well, you think, how can we define what that level is?
Well, nung panahon naman ng bata-bata tayo, okay na nga eh. Pero after 20 years of McCoy, 10 years of Gloria.
Pero mataas na rin ang tinaas ng sweldo ng mga pulis noon hanggang ngayon, ha?
Magkano ngayon ang basic nila? Mga 10, 12,000?
Yeah. Dati, 200 piso kinikita nila dyan, eh. They were very close to us.
Well, maybe yung 12 is good for a rookie, no?
Oo.
Pero yung rookie na matino for 1 year, keeping his nose very clean, pagka nagkasakit si Mrs., emergency operation, yun vulnerable na maalok. And then when the children start going around barefooted, shirtless, ayun, pag naalok ka ng piso, 2 piso, 10 piso, then...
Natutokso ng gusto.
And you cannot be a virgin all over again.
Well, I think part of the problem is to just realize the whole issue of corruption is a hydra-headed monster. So it's not simply a question of economics, although it is an important factor. But there are many other cultural and value problems associated with corruption.
No,
Diba?
we have not always been corrupt.
No, I didn't say that.
Ang ibig ko sabihin, talaga nung araw, maraming kwentong mga matitino, mayaman, pumasok sa gobyerno, naging pobre. Pero yun nga, ang sikreto, ng Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, the US, Japan, they are paid well. And then hanggang retirement nila, they're taken care of. Dito sa atin, talagang pag hindi nagsamantala nga, sabihin bobo ka, tanga ka.
Balik tayo sa whole issue, why nations fail. And one of the theories about why nations fail, I just received an email a couple of days ago of what's wrong with the Philippines. And ang nakita ko dito, sabi niya, from the time of the Spaniards, it was always a 70-30 break. 70% poor or 75% poor and the rest are a little bit of middle class, and then yung top 5% mo were the elite. Okay? And over the years, through the Americans, through the Spanish, through the Japanese, and through ourselves, our own making, that has not changed. Hindi na ba bago yung level of poverty? And therefore, how can you build positive values when people remain uneducated and poor?
Well, when I was young,
Maswerte ka.
no, yun nga, may isang kwento na isang PC chief, isang general, namatay sa apartment. Ngayon, coronel ka pa lang, nasa plutocratic mansion ka na in a gated community.
Well, we just read that a former general of the PNP has been charged because he did not file his SALN for something like 5 or 6 or 7 years.
8 years siya. Yung Matiliano raw.
Oo, si Matiliano. So, dito mo nakikita that the problem of corruption has become so endemic, meaning it's from top to bottom. So, the question is, it's the old question that people say, where will you find decent, honest, honorable leadership? Pag tinanggal mo lahat ng corrupt dyan sa gobyerno, baka ikaw lang matira.
Hindi.
Di ba? Paano naman yun, Kuya Rene? This is the problem. People sometimes talk to me and say, what can we do? What can we do to help this nation? Alam mo, sinasabi ko na lang isa. Huwag mo nang problemahin muna yon. Problemahin mo yung bakuran mo. Yun na lang ayusin mo.
Yeah.
At baka sakali kung sapat ng numero ng Pilipino ayusin ang kanilang sariling bakuran, may tatamaan dyan na politiko o public servant. Bob, 0907-433-0060 from Gilbert Celeres. Sir, good evening po at sa mga taga-sunod ng inyong programa. Ask ko lang po tungkol ho sa sin tax bill. Kapag may isa batas na nakakasiguro po ba tayo na malaki ang makukuha ng ating gobyerno kaysa dati? Saan ba tayo makakakita ng ganyang kasiguraduhan? Wala. It remains to be seen. Maybe in the beginning, biglang tataas yan. Kasi based on your existing inventory, taas na yan. No? Unless, for example, ang gagawin ng mga cigarette companies or tobacco companies, mag-a-advance production tapos load the market. So for the next 6 months or 1 year, halos walang makukuha ang gobyerno because they have advanced production, etc. na ilabas. But we will see what happens. Of course, the hope is tumaas ang take. But nobody can give any kind of guarantee except, that there will be hopefully some improvement. The issue is not whether there will be an improvement as much as how big will be the improvement. Diba?
Yeah, because there is a hidden cost.
So, 0927-313-5944, Francisco H. Briones of Tarlac City. Kahit nataasan ang buwis sa sigarilyo at alcohol sa taong may bisyo nito, ay gagawa pa din ng paraan para makabili para sa bisyo nila. Tama na pagibayuhin ang impormasyon sa masamang epekto nito sa kalusugan ng tao. Of course, people should still be informed. Talagang magkakaroon ka ng karamdaman pag pinagpatuloy mong paninigarilyo mo. Kanya lang, hindi natin masasabi kung ilan iiral yung karamdaman. Hindi natin masasabi na pwedeng 6 na buwan, merong 20 taon. We cannot say. All I can tell you is, pag nakita po ninyo ang baga ng tao na nagarilyong matagal, pag nakita po ninyo, ay talagang medyo...
Ay, yun nga yung controversy sa Amerika kung papakita graphically.
Oo.
Pero mukhang napatay yata na isang judge.
Oo.
But there are many things being done para takutin.
Oo.
But not effective yata. And then, as you and I have observed, bakit sa Norte, mga 70, no, 80, 90 anyos, tabako rin ng... Kaya hindi malinaw to some na may direct correlation despite all the medical findings.
One issue that has not been tackled in this sin tax bill is something that's very important when one senator had said in the past, and it was carried in all the papers, that the level that he was recommending was acceptable to companies like British American Tobacco. Ang loob-loob ko, tayo pala nagpapasa ng batas dito para sa mga banyaga. Not for the national good or the national interest. What do we care if British American Tobacco finds it excessive? Eh siyempre, lahat sila puro pera lang iniisip nila, hindi ba?
Well, in the real world, you take into account all these relevant considerations.
Well, tingin ko lang nagkamali siya ng pagbibigay ng emphasis at ginagamit niya na yung verso niya ay matino at maayos kasi katanggap-tanggap sa mga banyaga.
Maybe
I think that's poor
imprudent.
judgment, no?
Poor judgment.
Okay, from 0915-617-2239, Julius of Zamboanga City. Kuya Ray Orosa, pagtataasan ng tax, gobyerno lang ang makikinabang. Ako, kahit wala na makain ng pamilya ko, basta makapagsigarilyo lang ako.
Well, that is a reality that we have to face.
Ewan ko kung ako asawa mo at mga anak mo, baka ang tingin ko sa iyo meron na, ha, tayo naman. Ano ba yung pinagsasasabi mo? Ha?
Hindi, yun talaga psychic satisfaction ng tao.
Hindi ko, that's
Cannot
why I'm
be
talking.
ignored,
Di ba sinabi ko sa iyo, that's an addiction. A chemical addiction because of the additives in tobacco. And in fact, it's many times the additives that give certain flavors that enhance the addiction that is worst for your lungs.
Well, it's a reality we have to deal with. Ibang tao hindi makafunction pagka hindi...
Hindi, lahat tayo maging Ilocano na lang. Mag-rolyo na lang tayo ng ating tabako at yun ang ating hititin, wag nang idaan sa...
And they live long lives.
Kanya lang, alam mo, dati nagkaroon kami ng isang katulong from the north, tagalaban ng mga damit, na gano'n ang ginagawa. Kanya lang, pag nagsigarilyo siya, nandun na siya doon sa labas, doon sa tapayan doon na labahan. Pag siya nanigarilyo ng kanyang tabako, lahat ng mga kapitbahay namin naaamoy yung nalalanghap yung amoy ng tabako, no? Eh, alam mo namang medyo matapang yung tabako. But I think what we are seeing here is that probably opinion is fairly evenly divided about whether, simply on the issue of whether we should make cigarettes. Kasi when you label it sin, you are making a moral judgment. Okay? But of course, anything that is addictive, you have to be kailangan talaga mag-iingat tayo. Hindi naman siguro maaari na addictive, basta inom ka lang ng inom o hitit ka ng hitit or whatever, no? At sigurado masisira yung buhay mo eventually. But no guarantee, you might survive. Di ba?
Well, on a personal level, when I met Dulce,
Oo.
she was smoking.
Okay.
And then later on...
Gave it up for
gave
you.
it up.
Oh, how sweet.
Pero yun nga,
Oo.
maraming mga anong ganyan. And then the Lord took her back. Reckless driver. So,
Alright.
hindi natin alam ang mangyayari sa buhay talaga natin. Kung
God is the one that controls living. You know, we have to come to the point of believing that our living and dying is up to God, not up to man.
Correct.
Okay, alam po ninyo, as usual, naubos na naman tayo ng panahon. I want to thank Kuya Rene for being so kind to be with us today. Alam mo, natutuwa talaga ako sa freshness ng mga opinion nitong ating kapatid. You know, you cannot really put Rene in a certain label, except to say that The man is true to his word. He's got his principles, and he tries to live with according to those principles as best as he possibly can. And that is one trait that we look for in many, many other public servants. Hindi naman tayo mahanap ng mga genius eh. Hindi naman tayo mahanap dyan ng mga santo. But yun lang nakikita mo na ang talagang malasakit nila, taong bayan at kabutihan ng ating bansa.
Kaya lang di ko malaman kung bakit
Nawala.
ang nakumbida mo, hindi naninigarilyo, hindi rin tumatoma.
Okay, dalawa na tayo. Hindi na I used to, many years ago. I stopped smoking 30 years ago.
So wala tayo ng minor vices, no?
Major vices. Salamat po sa inyong pagdalo sa gabing ito at pagsubaybay sa ating programa. I hope you will think about some of these issues and you can let your legislators know what you feel about this issue. Thank you and God bless you. We'll see you next week.